YouTube channel. Welcome to the world of crazy real-life stories.
Most people spend their entire lives chasing success. If someone had told me that success could erase the very thing that made me human, I would have laughed in their face. I don't laugh anymore. Everything changed during the winter of 2011, a few weeks after I moved to New York City. I was 26, carrying nothing but 2 overstuffed suitcases, a fresh job offer, and the stubborn belief that I was finally escaping the ordinary life I'd grown up with in Rochester. My apartment in Murray Hill wasn't impressive by any stretch. The building looked older than most of the people living inside it. Cold air slipped through the cracked window frames. The ancient radiator groaned through the night without producing much heat, and every step across the wooden floor sounded like someone walking directly beneath me. But I loved it. It was mine. Every chipped wall and creaking floorboard reminded me that I'd finally made it to the city I'd dreamed about since college. A few days later, I started working for Ashcroft & Vale, one of Manhattan's most exclusive luxury real estate firms. They didn't waste time selling ordinary houses. Their clients collected castles, private vineyards, historic estates, and skyscraper penthouses the way most people collected watches. On my very first week, the office buzzed with excitement. Someone had closed a massive international deal involving an abandoned palace somewhere in Eastern Europe. I barely understood the details, but everyone celebrated as though they'd personally become millionaires overnight. I spent my days organizing contracts, memorizing client files, and trying not to spill coffee on executives who earned more in a week than I'd ever seen in my bank account. One man stood above everyone else. Victor Ashcroft. He wasn't particularly tall, but he had the kind of presence that filled every room before he even spoke. His expensive suits couldn't hide his broad frame, and his deep voice carried the rough edge of someone who had spent decades giving orders instead of asking questions. Every conversation stopped when he walked by. People admired him. No one questioned him. Late Friday evening, as I shut down my computer and prepared to head home, I heard a knock against my office door. Victor stepped inside. Without saying a word, he quietly closed the door behind him. "You've been settling in well, Daniel," he said. "I've been trying." "No," he replied with a faint smile. "You've been watching." The comment caught me off guard. He reached into his pocket and placed a small silver token on my desk. It wasn't a coin. It wasn't jewelry either. One side displayed a strange symbol that resembled a raven perched above an hourglass. The engraving was impossibly detailed, almost as if it had been carved by hand centuries ago. "Keep observant," Victor said. "People who notice the smallest things usually go the furthest." Before I could ask what he meant, he slid a black envelope across the desk. There was no company branding, no return address, only the same raven symbol pressed into the wax seal. Inside rested a thick cream-colored card with elegant handwriting. One location, one time, and beneath it, a single word, Astri. "What does that mean?" I asked. Victor looked at me for several silent seconds before answering. "It only means something after midnight." Then he walked away. The elevator ride home felt longer than usual. I kept pulling the invitation from my coat pocket, staring at the unfamiliar word, trying to convince myself it was nothing more than some exclusive networking event. But something about that invitation refused to feel ordinary. And before the night was over, I would discover that some doors in New York aren't hidden because they're forgotten. They're hidden because they're never supposed to be opened. The invitation sat on my kitchen counter for nearly 2 hours while I argued with myself. Every instinct told me to throw it away. Yet every dream I'd ever had whispered the exact opposite. People didn't become successful by refusing opportunities, especially opportunities offered personally by men like Victor Ashcroft. Just before 9, I put on the only tailored suit I owned, straightened my tie, and left the apartment. The address led me far from the glittering streets of Midtown. Block by block, the city transformed. Luxury storefronts disappeared, replaced by aging brick buildings, abandoned warehouses, and silent streets where even the traffic seemed reluctant to pass. The final destination was an old brick building squeezed between 2 shuttered businesses near the East River. There wasn't a single sign, no lights, no indication that anyone had occupied the place in years. I checked the invitation twice before knocking. Nothing. Then a narrow metal panel slid open at eye level. A pair of pale gray eyes studied me without blinking. "You're late," a raspy voice muttered. I glanced at my watch. It was exactly 9. I. I was told to come here. The man didn't respond. Instead, he simply asked. The word. I swallowed. Astri. The panel slammed shut. A heavy lock clicked somewhere inside. The rusted door slowly creaked open. No one stood behind it anymore. Only a narrow stone staircase disappearing into darkness. For a long moment, I considered walking away. Something deep inside me screamed that this wasn't a celebration. It was a test. But curiosity has ruined better men than me. I started down. Each step carried me farther beneath the city. The temperature dropped noticeably. The air smelled damp, mixed with old stone and something metallic that reminded me of coins left in rainwater. The staircase seemed endless. When I finally reached the bottom, another door waited ahead. Unlike the first one, this one was made of polished oak, decorated with carvings that looked impossibly old. Strange birds circled a full moon while hooded figures knelt beneath them. Soft conversation echoed from the other side, along with distant laughter. I knocked. The voices stopped instantly. Silence. Then someone spoke. State your name. Daniel Mercer. Another pause. Who invited you? Victor Ashcroft. Several locks disengaged one after another. The door swung inward. The room beyond looked nothing like New York. Massive stone pillars surrounded a circular chamber lit entirely by candles. Their flames flickered without any noticeable breeze, throwing distorted shadows across walls covered in ancient symbols. Around 20 people stood quietly inside. Every single one wore a mask. Some resembled ravens, others wolves. A few looked almost human, but with unsettling smiles carved into the wood. Despite the disguises, I recognized several voices. Senior partners, department heads, executives I'd seen only hours earlier inside the office. Standing at the center of the chamber was Victor. Except tonight, he looked different, calmer, older somehow. He raised one hand, and every conversation ended instantly. I'm glad you accepted the invitation, Daniel. I honestly thought this was a company dinner. A few masked guests chuckled. Victor smiled. In a way, it is. He motioned toward a stone pedestal positioned beneath a stained glass skylight that should have been impossible this far underground. Resting on the pedestal sat an object hidden beneath a black velvet cloth. We all came here for the same reason, Victor said quietly. To receive what the world refuses to give freely. As he pulled away the cloth, every candle in the chamber flickered at once. Beneath it stood a weathered statue unlike anything I'd ever seen. It resembled a great raven, but its wings ended in skeletal hands, and instead of eyes, polished black stone stared back at me with an unnatural shine. For a split second, I could have sworn the statue blinked. My heart skipped. Then Victor reached into his coat and slowly produced a ceremonial knife. He turned toward me. Before anyone earns our trust, he placed the blade into my trembling hand. They must first make an offering. My fingers tightened around the knife before I even realized I had accepted it. The handle was carved from dark wood polished smooth by years of use. The blade reflected the candlelight so perfectly that it looked almost liquid, as if it had never touched air before tonight. I think you've mistaken me for someone else, I said, forcing a nervous laugh. If this is some kind of initiation, I appreciate the invitation, but I don't think I'm the right person. No one laughed. No one even moved. The silence pressing against the walls felt heavier than the stone surrounding us. Victor took a slow step closer. You've spent your whole life wanting more, he said calmly. A better future. More money. More respect. More influence. He looked directly into my eyes. Tonight, we're simply giving you the opportunity to claim it. I don't understand. You don't have to. One of the masked guests began whispering. Another joined. Within seconds, the entire chamber echoed with a low rhythmic chant. I couldn't recognize the language, but something about the sound made my chest tighten. It wasn't loud. It was steady, like dozens of heartbeats falling into perfect rhythm. The candles dimmed. The temperature dropped. I suddenly realized the room wasn't getting colder. It was getting quieter. Even my own breathing sounded distant. Victor pointed toward the raven statue. Every person standing in this room once stood exactly where you are now. He slowly rolled up his sleeve. A thin scar crossed the center of his palm. So did I. Around the chamber, others quietly raised their hands. Every one of them carried the same faded mark. Years old. Perfectly straight. My pulse quickened. This isn't normal. No, Victor replied. It isn't. He nodded toward the statue. Success has always required sacrifice. I looked around again, hoping someone would smile or admit this had all been an elaborate performance. Instead, every masked figure stood perfectly still, watching me, waiting. If I leave now? I asked. Victor's expression never changed. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. The words struck harder than they should have, because they weren't entirely wrong. I'd spent years wondering exactly that. Wondering why opportunities always seemed to belong to someone else. Wondering why hard work alone never felt enough. Victor extended his hand. No one is forcing you. You choose. The chanting grew louder. Not louder in volume. Closer. As though the voices were no longer coming from the room, but from somewhere inside my own head. I stared down at the blade. One small cut. That was all. My logical mind screamed that none of this made sense. But another part of me, the ambitious, impatient part, kept whispering that extraordinary rewards never came from ordinary decisions. Taking a slow breath, I pressed the edge of the blade against my left palm. The steel felt strangely warm. I hesitated one last time, then drew it across my skin. Pain flashed through my hand. A thin line of blood appeared almost instantly. Several crimson drops flashed onto the stone below. The moment the blood touched the raven statue, every candle in the chamber went out. Darkness swallowed the room. For one endless second, I couldn't hear anything. No chanting, no breathing, nothing. Then, a sharp crack echoed beneath my feet. The ground trembled. Something icy rushed through my body like freezing water flowing inside my veins. My heartbeat stopped, or at least it felt like it did. Suddenly, I wasn't standing in the chamber anymore. I was somewhere else. A place without walls, without light, without sound, only endless darkness. And deep within it, two enormous golden eyes slowly opened. They weren't looking at me. They were looking through me. A voice, ancient, calm, and impossibly close, whispered only 4 words. The bargain has begun. The next instant, I was back inside the chamber, collapsing onto the cold stone floor, gasping for air while everyone around me remained perfectly still, as though they had expected exactly this to happen. I woke with Victor kneeling beside me. Easy, he said quietly. The first time is always the hardest. My lungs burned as I fought to catch my breath. My clothes were soaked with sweat, yet the chamber had become strangely warm. The candles had somehow relit themselves, their flames burning steadily as though nothing unusual had happened. What was that? I managed to whisper. Victor offered me a hand. You crossed the threshold. I ignored it and forced myself to stand. No, I saw something. His smile barely changed. So did we. I looked toward the raven statue. The blood I'd spilled only moments earlier had vanished. The stone surface looked untouched, polished smooth as if it had never been stained. I'm leaving. I turned toward the staircase. Before I could take more than 2 steps, Victor's voice stopped me. You can leave this place. I looked back. But what happened here will never leave you. Life changed almost immediately. Within weeks, clients who had ignored my emails suddenly called me first. Deals that should have fallen apart somehow worked themselves out. Investors trusted me before I even finished speaking. Promotions arrived one after another, each faster than the last. By the end of my 2nd year, I had become one of the youngest senior brokers in the company's history. Money poured in. I traded my tiny apartment for a luxury loft overlooking the Hudson. I bought a car I'd once admired only in magazines. Expensive restaurants, tailored suits, private flights. Everything I'd spent years dreaming about became ordinary. People envied my life. They called me lucky. They had no idea. Because every success came with something I couldn't explain. Food slowly lost its flavor. Music sounded empty. Even laughter felt rehearsed, as though I were copying emotions instead of feeling them. Relationships never lasted. Friends said I'd changed. My parents told me I sounded distant every time we spoke. They weren't wrong. It felt like someone had quietly turned the volume down on every human emotion I possessed. One rainy evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror after another 12-hour workday. For several seconds, I couldn't recognize the man staring back at me. His face was mine. His eyes weren't. Dark circles had settled beneath them, and the spark I'd once carried had disappeared entirely. When I reached toward the mirror, my reflection didn't move. It remained perfectly still, smiling. A slow, unfamiliar smile. I stumbled backward, blinking hard. The reflection immediately copied my movements again. I convinced myself I was exhausted. Nothing more. But the strange incidents continued. Sometimes I heard wings fluttering through empty rooms. Sometimes I caught the faint silhouette of a raven perched outside impossible windows 20 stories above the street. Other nights I woke just before dawn, certain someone had whispered my name directly into my ear. Doctors blamed stress. Therapists suggested burnout. Sleeping pills only made the dreams worse. In every dream, I found myself standing inside that underground chamber again. The statue was always waiting. Only now, it no longer looked like carved stone. Its chest slowly rose and fell with each breath. Its black eyes followed me wherever I walked. And every single dream ended the same way. The creature would tilt its head, open its beak, and ask a question that terrified me more each time I heard it. How much more are you willing to trade? The worst part wasn't that I kept hearing the question. It was that, somewhere deep inside me, I was beginning to wonder what my answer would be. Years passed. From the outside, my life looked perfect. Business magazines featured my interviews. Financial podcasts invited me to discuss the secrets behind my rapid success. Younger brokers treated me like a mentor, convinced I'd discovered some hidden formula for getting ahead. If only they knew. Every achievement felt like adding another brick to a prison I couldn't escape. I stopped celebrating promotions because they no longer meant anything. I bought expensive watches that never excited me. I traveled across Europe and Asia, yet every city felt exactly the same. Beautiful, crowded, and completely empty. One evening, after closing the largest deal of my career, I received an envelope at my office. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single black feather. Nothing else. I didn't need an explanation. That night, against every instinct telling me to burn it, I returned to the abandoned building near the East River. It hadn't changed. The rusted door, the narrow staircase, the damp smell beneath the city. It was all exactly as I remembered. Only this time, no one stopped me. The chamber waited in complete silence. The candles were already burning. Victor stood alone beside the raven statue. He looked older than I remembered. His shoulders had begun to sag, and the confidence that once filled every room had faded into exhaustion. I wondered how long it would take, he said. I want it back. He nodded slowly, almost sadly. So did I. My life feels empty. It should. You told me I'd gain success. You did. You never told me what I'd lose. Victor stared at the statue for a long moment before answering. You never asked. Anger exploded inside me. There has to be a way to undo this. For the first time since I'd met him, Victor laughed. Not proudly, not confidently, hopelessly. Everyone asks that question eventually. He rolled up his sleeve. The thin scar across his palm had spread into dark veins stretching toward his wrist. I've searched for 28 years. His voice cracked. There is no bargain without a price. Before I could respond, the chamber began to shake. The candles flickered violently. A low grinding sound echoed beneath the floor. The raven statue moved. Not in my imagination. Not in another dream. Its stone wings unfolded with the slow scrape of ancient rock grinding against rock. Dust drifted into the air. The black eyes I'd seen in my nightmares turned toward us. This time they blinked. Victor slowly stepped forward. I've delayed this long enough. What are you doing? I shouted. He smiled faintly. The debt always comes due. The shadows beneath the statue spread across the floor like black water. Within seconds they reached Victor's feet. He didn't resist. He simply closed his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. The darkness swallowed him without a sound. One heartbeat, he was standing there. The next, he was gone. Only his silver cufflink remained on the stone floor. Silence returned. The statue's eyes shifted toward me. Then the same ancient voice I'd heard years earlier echoed through the chamber.
Hit the like and subscribe for more such videos.